Hello ladies and gentlemen, Panzer here, and today I'm taking a look at Lifeless Planet. Now, Lifeless Planet is a story-driven adventure game that has been developed by Stage 2 Studios, which is a small indie studio based in the US. Now, the story of this game is told mainly through voiceovers and interactive objects in the environment, as well as the actual design of the environment itself. But of course, as much as possible, I will be avoiding spoilers in this video. Now, in Lifeless Planet, you play an astronaut who has crash-landed on this barren-looking planet. While the planet itself may be devoid of all life, it does appear that there's something more sinister afoot. Now, as an adventure game, of course, environment is particularly important, and this game doesn't skimp on it. There's vast landscapes, which, for all its barrenness, does convey a sense of bleakness in the actual story, and does very well at making the character feel very small. Indeed, the third-person perspective only goes to further that and make your character appear even smaller. Adding on to the overall atmosphere is the music. While it's intermittent at best, it is of good quality and does help to punctuate key events in the game and story. However, the overall silence of the soundscape within the game does appear to be a little bit excessive. While I understand this probably is done intentionally, in my opinion, it does make the game feel a lot emptier than it should. Now on to actual gameplay, and the core part of the game does appear to be platforming puzzles. The player, of course, being able to jump from platform to platform and make use of a double jump mechanic in the form of a single burst jetpack. While this is the base form of gameplay, the player will encounter new equipment later on, which will, of course, unlock the possibility of many different types of puzzles. After 2 hours of gameplay, I have encountered several different types of puzzles, and while they do not appear to be particularly challenging at times, the variety is still enough to keep you entertained as well as engrossed in the story. However, Lifeless Planet is not without its faults. While it is still, in my opinion, a very good example of an enjoyable single-player experience, it is still quite rough around the edges. First up, right at the beginning, the player is thrown into the deep end. Without much explanation given, the player is placed on a timer and is forced to find an object located in the world. With no bearing or direction or any hints of any sort, the player is then on a countdown timer to death in order to find it. In some cases, this can lead to unnecessary frustration because even though the timing may seem generous at first, players may often find themselves dying just short of reaching their targets. Any player not sure of what to expect may find this frustration all too much. Next, the controls, while responsive, are a little bit quirky. When using the A and D keys, one might expect the character to actually move sideways, perpendicular to the direction of the camera's facing. However, what it actually does is cause your character to turn and orbit the camera. While this may seem to not be a big deal at all, in a game that requires platforming with a reasonable degree of accuracy, this may seem to be quite a big hindrance. Using a controller may solve this problem, however, from my experience on a keyboard, moving slower and stopping completely at times seems to be the only way to prevent yourself from running right off a platform at times. There are some minor performance issues, but nothing that really seems to stand out all too much. Still can't really ignore the frame rate drops that appear from time to time, but mostly these are explainable by long view distances as well as having large objects on screen. So, is it any good? Well, all in all, it definitely deserves the tag of walking simulator, but the puzzles themselves are decently varied and well spaced out, so they do come in at a right time to break up the walking segments before it gets too monotonous. Even though the puzzles themselves are fairly simple, the story comes in and is compelling enough that I would also like to continue playing. Still, it's not the astronaut moonwalk simulator that some might have hoped it was based on the trailers, but it's still an enjoyable single-player experience nonetheless. I've been playing this game for about 2 hours, and I don't believe I'm even halfway through it. Ultimately, if you're in the market looking for a good single-player experience with a decent story and a nice setting, this might be one worth checking out. For the length of time that you will play it for, it might actually be justifying its price. This has been Panzer taking a look at Lifeless Planet, now available on Steam for $19.99 or your regional equivalent. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Kill.